Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives of the world's leading global brands. Super excited about this episode actually. This guest actually joined us 5 years ago, so time really flies. We're joined by Paulo Pisano, who's now the Chief People Officer at Booking.com. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Pretty well. How are you, Chris?
As I said, I was looking back at the episode. I couldn't believe it. 5 years. We're only 6 years old, so
that's amazing. Congratulations on that, by the way. And, I mean, as we say, right, these 2 years feel like a lifetime as well. So that's 6 years might feel like 10 or 15 for you, right?
How are things for you? How are you settling in at Booking.com? How long has it been now?
Yeah, it's been almost 2 years. So I joined in March 2020. Something to be said about joining.
Yeah, I was about to say,
a tech travel company 2 weeks before kind of COVID kicked in really hard. So one of my first kind of big debates and decisions in the company was around, do we shut down 200 offices around the world or not? What do we do?
Wow.
And then it's been, as they say, fun ever since, right? It's been a tough but a very interesting ride, I think, this couple of years.
Yeah. I think everyone listening can relate to that right now. What was it that attracted you, just out of curiosity, to the business after being in your previous organization for quite some time, right?
I was with Galp for about a bit over 4 years, 4.5 years maybe. And it's interesting for me. It's a bit like going back to something closer to the majority of my career, because I've done most of my career has been in services, professional services, financial services, some technology. And Galp was a venture into an industrial group of, doing energy, which was very different from a lot of what I'd done before. It was a fantastic experience, just opened my mind to kind of a whole new sector. At the same time, bumping into Booking and joining the company has this feeling of going back home in a way, right? It's more similar to some of the things I've done before. It's an incredibly international company, very dynamic, and I mean, COVID aside, it's been a really great experience.
Amazing. Well, on that point, then, what are some of the sort of the challenges that you're seeing that yourselves and other companies are facing as I almost hesitate to say emerge from the pandemic, because every time we say emerge, we go back. But I'm going to hope this time and say as we emerge from the pandemic.
Yeah, no, indeed. So we have this desire, right, to emerge from it as quickly as possible, but it's not completely within our control. I think, when you think about challenges, it depends a bit on the sector also, right? Because you have some sectors were very deeply affected by the pandemic, and then some were really not as affected by the whole thing, and you have everything else in between, right? But I do think that perhaps in common for everyone, this sudden move we had into remote working has been a great experiment for all of us, right? And I think that although we've proven that we can survive in a remote environment, there's a distance between surviving and really thriving on remote, right? So I think, and also think that most countries, to your point, we're opening, we're closing, we're opening, we're closing. We're not yet in some sort of new normal, which means that it's probably safe to say that the majority of companies haven't really had enough time or depth in the hybrid space. So I think working on hybrid will be a natural challenge, right, for all of us. How do we figure this out? And then the other part of it, which we all know, like we're facing right now, one of the hottest employment markets in decades. And when you combine that with the absence of being together, right? Working together, connecting informally with each other, meeting for drinks, etc. It's a tough combination, right? And so it's led to the so-called great resignation, or all sorts of other fancy names people are giving to it.
Yeah.
But the bottom line
the great awakening, right? Is everyone the great awakening?
No, look, every week a new kind of consulting company or whatever will come up.
So they could sell you some more solutions, right?
Exactly.
Well, go on. Sorry.
Who knows? But the fact is, it's hard, right? Because companies that were always remote, they were born remote, they've developed a way of working and ethos, and even attracted the types of people that want to work in that environment. They're probably in a safer space. But for other companies that we're very office centric. If I think about bookings offices, for example, they're the classic, tech firm offices. There are a lot of fun. There's a lot happening there. There's, the restaurant and games rooms and meditation rooms and events, and all of that is constantly going on. When you move from having that level of connection with your colleagues to having to interact through a screen, and you combine that with the fatigue of this whole situation, right, of COVID, and you link that with the market, it's a tough combination. So I think retention, engagement, attraction of talent are obviously some of the big challenges we've got going on as well.
Yeah. I also think there's this conversation that's going around that there has to be a one or the other. Like you have a hybrid or you're in office. I think companies are realizing that it's going to be a hybrid approach, and it took a while for companies to realize that this isn't again. Otherwise, you're going back to this one size fits all, and I've got friends now where it's like you have to come back 5 days a week, or we're going completely remote, and then you got the other half saying I want to be in an office. Exactly. I don't want to be at home, and I live in a small apartment with 3 friends. I don't want to be gathering around a table trying to do that. And companies are trying to figure out that happy medium in between. But a lot of our systems, processes are not designed to succeed in that environment. I agree
with you. The other part also you hear a lot, right, is that just in the examples you've used, more often than not, companies are optimizing, or not companies are optimizing, but they're talking about optimizing for the individual. Don't get me wrong, that's important. But you have to optimize for the team. You have to optimize for the culture of the company as well. So it's not just one dimension, right? It's how do you make sure you balance in a way that you're providing the flexibility that people need, while you also provide the, kind of the connectivity and the productivity that teams need, right? So you need to figure that balance out. And I think right now I'm hearing a lot more talked about individuals and not enough about teams and about the overall organizations as well.
That's actually a good point, because, and also something even in a small business I've struggled with, because if you have a unit or a team where you have 3 people that want to work 100% remote and the other 3 that want to come come in the office, then you're going to have to try to balance, when do we meet? How do we meet? How do we collaborate? What does that look like? And it gets really complex of saying, I've had situations where, well, I can't come in on those days, Chris. Well, there needs to be a day where we can come in, and all of it is really tough, like to be able to balance that. And that's just one team in a small company. Exactly. You think about a company like yours, it gets super complex. And then you have the different geographies, and the cultural element that comes into it within different countries and regions. I was speaking to a CHRO yesterday. They're like, Chris, we've got 90,000 employees across across the entire world. The same approach is not going to work for every single one of those environments as well. So it's very tough. And again, the ever changing landscape. They're like, I was like, how are you getting on yesterday? And she's like, I don't even know what's happening. One day we're fine and we're going here, over here, and times that by 100 different regions or countries. Sorry. It's just impossible to keep up.
It's hard. To your point, right? You gotta not only be conscious there's going to be differences between different countries, but the guarantee these are going to change over time. It's kind of whatever is true today may be changing tomorrow, because a government is changing their approach to it, the regulations, what they're requiring, what's happening, how people are reacting to it. So I think, flexibility is kind of the name of the game here.
Yeah. Or on the flip side of that, then where do you see the biggest opportunities for companies right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's many opportunities, right? I think one of the biggest opportunities, it connects exactly with what we're talking about, is I think for companies to be more deliberate about their strategy and about the culture, the ways of working, and kind of how they organize themselves in order to deliver on the strategy, right? Because it's funny, if you remember prior to the pandemic, right, we had all around this VUCA. Everyone's talking about VUCA.
The VUCA world. Yeah.
Oh, VUCA. No, there
Yeah.
was like, in every corporate bingo card.
Every time, every event. Yeah.
Right. And now it's almost like hold my beer, right? Because if we thought that was volatile and uncertain and whatever, imagine now, right? This is a whole new level of it. So I think revisiting our strategies, reprioritizing and focusing on what is truly most important, focusing the energy, the resources, the attention that we have. This is a great time for that. This is, I think, a great opportunity for companies to be more deliberate, right? Explore how we want to connect with our workforce, not just employees, by the way. I mean, the broader ecosystem, right, that you do business in, ways of working. Hybrid is part of ways of working, but it's not all, right? Hybrid is the front of mind as we're talking about. There's complexities there. But if you think about it, I'd say in average companies haven't really gone deep enough on how do you work in a given company in order to be kind of more productive and kind of to have more impact. So this is a great kind of reset moment for us to question, if what we were doing before worked, if it still works, or what kind of adjustments we need to make.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably one of the biggest opportunities I see around this.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because for years we've all been, or many HR leaders have been advocating for a lot of this and pushing for a lot of this, and the pandemic accelerated that now. And I'm seeing companies run with it and do great things, but I'm also seeing the opposite, where companies going straight back to what they did before. It's like, because it's easier, right? It's easier just to say, let's just go back to working 9 to 5 and do the same things over and over again and do that. How are you ensuring that, at booking.com, that you can capitalize on this moment?
Look, for us, it's first and foremost, it's about keeping an open dialogue across the organization, engage with our employees, engage with our kind of various groups, employee representative groups, engage with various teams, engage with our customers and our partners, right, to understand what's important for them, and then try to adapt and adjust over time. As I said, I don't think there is a static point that's an ideal point you're going to reach. It's really, how do you get the organization to become more flexible so it can adjust and adapt to what I think will continue to be a pretty volatile environment. And I think time will tell also, right? Because, as you say, Chris, some companies are going back to their default mode from before because it's easier, or other companies are just staying where they are now, that stay fully remote because it's easier. Some companies are adjusting to some kind of hybrid environment because other companies are doing it, so they're getting into that kind of herd mentality. And what those things have in common is that they're not very deliberate, right? They are just going with what's easy. Now, I'm not saying that you should never go with what's easy. Sometimes, if you look at the portfolio of decisions you have to make, maybe some of them it's fine to go with default, with what's easier. But what I'm saying is that being more deliberate about it, kind of engaging in conversations that help you develop good criteria for a good decision is really important. And I think time will tell, right? That's the other part of it, right? We don't know yet what's going to work more effectively. We need to give it time. 2 years, in the big scheme of things, is nothing, right?
We're doing this for hundreds of years. For hundreds of years, right? We've been operating in this model. We can't base just 2 years on...
We need to, for the last few decades, we have what we had kind of before. What's going to work after? We'll see. We'll see what's more attractive for people. And it's a dynamic market. It matters what other companies do.
Of course.
If you're the only company doing remote, everyone else has gone back to the office. Well, that makes a difference versus the other way around. So you have to do what makes sense for you, but you have to keep an eye on what's happening in the market, and you have to be adaptable to that too.
Yeah, I think you're completely right, because the companies that I'm speaking to every day that are doing very, very well, they've been super intentional. Mm-hmm. They're not just going remote for the sake of going remote. They're not going to hybrid for the sake of it's specifically questioned and deep dived and constantly asking, why are we doing this? What is it like? Is it aligned with our vision, our value, our people, etc.? And really making a decision based on as opposed to going, everyone's going hybrid, let's go hybrid. Because it's not for everyone. And some companies can't do that, right? In industries as well. And how do you manage that? So the ones I'm seeing that are doing very well have been super intentional about why they're making these decisions, as well. When you look back over the last sort of 24 months, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned, both personally leading through this time in this VUCA world, as you said earlier, and also about the organization as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of I think learnings, right, from this last couple of years. I mean, front of mind for me is one is humbleness in a broad sense of the word. It's a good reminder for us, I think, about humbleness, because we saw early on in the pandemic, but still see it, right? Many instances where people or organizations come from a place of certainty, right? Now we're going to do this. We know what this is. We're going to go left. We're going to go right. And only to see them track back, and turn, 180 degrees kind of back because they had to change their perspective because it wasn't right, what they were thinking. And I think the recognition that we are in kind of uncharted waters here, right? And there's still a lot we don't know about COVID, about vaccines, about treatments, about the work environment. So I think it's important to take action when you face a crisis. So you shouldn't be paralyzed by it, but at the same time, you got to keep an open mind and just allow yourself to take in new information, new insights, and balance that action bias with some humbleness in that, your perspective might be wrong, right? And you got to be able to change it if it's necessary. So that's one thing that is very much kind of front of mind for me that I've seen around, and I still see kind of around me. The other one is, I think, this notion that less is more, right? Because I think one of the good things about a crisis is that it forces you to focus on what's essential, right? It actually, kind of forces you to question what is essential, so then you can act on it, right? And we know we have an issue of focus in the corporate world in general, right? Companies grow, then you have more complexity, then you have more people, more projects, you need more coordination between people and teams and countries. And in a crisis really gets you to focus your energy and to do fewer things better. And my view is that this is not something that's just useful for a crisis. It's very useful in general, right? How do you prioritize, constantly? How do you question yourself, your teams? Are we working on the few things that are going to make the most difference for the organization? I think that's a very clear learning. I mean, you could argue we've learned that throughout our careers, but the pandemic now is a good reminder of the importance of doing that.
Yeah.
And the other bit, Chris, I'm sure you're hearing from a lot of people, but is over communication, right? The importance of good communication, but during a crisis, you got to communicate so much more, right? And so much better. So early in the crisis at Booking, we focused really strongly on frequent, on open communication with people. It was very well received by our colleagues around the world. And then, as the crisis deepened in 2020, and we started adjusting into kind of remote working and all of that, we continue to strengthen the communication muscles in the organization, right? And I think when we're not in the same place, when you can't connect informally, you can't feel the environment by walking around, right? You can't have random encounters with people in the office. It's super important to create, great communication channels and then create a lot of room for dialogue in the organization. Because it's almost like you have to architect that, you have to construct that, because you don't have it naturally around you, right? So that's really important.
That's something that comes up a lot, because early on, companies did quite a bad job of just bombarding people with, and to the point where people weren't even checking the messages because 90% of what was there wasn't even relevant to the individual, right? And many HR leaders said to me, Chris, I'm like all of a sudden a communications expert. I'm writing copy every day. I'm having to customize it to 20 different regions, and I'm having to keep track of all of these things. And it was just like, that was most of their role, right? Just keeping everyone informed, up to date. And there was a lot of research that came out, I think it was the Edelman Trust Barometer that said that people, they had like government, et cetera, and who do you trust the most getting information from? It was their company. So their company was their number one source of information and news about the pandemic. So it made me realize as well, as an employer, you have a real responsibility, because your employees are not just looking at you as their job, but the people to inform them of what to do, where to go, safety precautions, etc. And I was like, wow, like I didn't really see it from that perspective beforehand. So I've seen a lot of companies both invest in that area, but also from a technology perspective, in order to have this right systems that can customize and tailor that messaging to audiences on what's relevant for you and what's relevant for me as well.
So, there's something natural, I think, about that observation that you make from kind of, from Edelman and other kind of research, that I think in times of crisis, people default to their tribes, right? So you default to who you know and kind of you connect with where you have kind of that trust closer to you. And then also when you think about the challenges that governments had, they're massive challenges, right? Because imagine if it's hard enough to take an organization through a crisis like this, taking a whole country through it. Yeah. And then some of the conflicts that you have, right? Because for example, you want people to be vaccinated. On the other hand, maybe there are treatments that might be effective, but if you're, kind of too loud about those treatments, then the people who are afraid of being vaccinated might choose not to be vaccinated because they think they're treatments, so I don't need the vaccine. Then it plays against your campaign to vaccinate. And all the kind of the conflicts that governments have to deal with are extremely challenging. And at a company level is a little bit more, it's a bit closer kind of to everyone, a little bit more one kind of direction you have to take. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think it's only kind of natural in a way it happened this way. But it's interesting because I think it's a good reminder that communication is important always, right? I think that once you develop a strong communication muscle, as we go back to a hybrid kind of workplace or a workplace that's more based in the office, I think the companies that keep that muscle for communication will have a differential as well, right? Because it's going to make it, it's going to really 100%. Keep them more engaged.
Yeah. What did you learn about yourself during this time? Because it couldn't have been easy, right? It's not been. It's not been easy.
Well, first I learned I'm not special because I left the financial services industry just before we had the financial services meltdown, and everyone told me, "Oh, Paulo, you have such a good timing. You somehow knew that this was going to happen."
Now you've done the opposite.
The universe coming around and saying, "I've joined travel just before COVID." So I'm not special. But jokes apart, I think one thing, Chris, I think it's important is this notion of putting your oxygen mask first, as they say in the airplanes. So I've been reminded throughout this that if I don't take care of myself in a kind of a difficult period, then I can't be as much help for the people around me, right? For my colleagues, for my team. And that's been something I've been reminding my team of as well, right? Is make sure you're taking care of yourself, because and HR is a classic one, right? We often take care of everybody else, or we hold standards for everybody else, and then we don't necessarily walk the talk for ourselves. So taking care of ourselves, I think it's really important so that we can play the long game here, and we can be an example also for people around us. So for me, that was a really kind of important reminder, I think, throughout the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that was the same before, but then the pandemic even highlighted that even more so, because for a long time it's like who does HR turn to in the business? In many times we all turn to HR, but then who do you turn to during these times? So it's been a tough one. I know something you're really passionate about. I follow you on LinkedIn, and a lot of what you post about is and I can see it's a real passion area, is around creating that sort of culture of inclusion and well-being. Tell us a little bit more about that and some of the work that you're doing, because I won't spoil it for everyone.
No, look, it is an area of interest for me for a very long time, kind of way before Booking. But I was very pleased that when I got to Booking, it's not something that was a stranger to Booking, right? Booking had been, I think, investing in this space because it's a very diverse organization. We have, I think over 150 nationalities, 200 offices, 70 countries, and I think we've built a culture that has clearly benefited from the richness of the talent that we have, right? So it's not something that just happened. It's something that you can see how it permeates kind of everything that we do and is in many ways representative of kind of the ecosystem where we do business in, right? So I think there's an alignment there. And it was nice to see also Booking recognized by its people, right? It always makes a difference. So I think in general, we fare on kind of the top, I think 5% of companies in the inclusion space in the tech sector, which is really nice. But we know it's a journey also, right? It's not a place we got to and we can just be proud of and we can relax about. So there's still a lot of work to do in this space. For us, employee resource groups, the ERGs, they play a really important role in terms of education, in terms of building awareness, building, allyship, support, connection between people. We've developed some very simple but easy to scale recognition programs also. So I think when you do those types of things, you got to keep them simple, you got to keep them scalable. And something we've been working on, we launched a couple of new things kind of last year. We have things like speaker series, right, featuring senior leaders from underrepresented minorities. So that's important for us, so people can see kind of in a way themselves, right, in some of those roles, kind of, and learn about different ways in which people got there and learned, kind of throughout their careers. We run discussion groups also kind of across a number of relevant themes around this. And now more recently, we started piloting some work also with inclusive leadership and team coaching for the top of the house. So there are a number of things we're doing. There's more than that, but what I think is important is that there's no silver bullet on this, right? This is a systemic challenge and I think a systemic opportunity as well. So you have to act on many dimensions of it over time. And I'm glad that, kind of the company has really kind of embraced that kind of work. We've got a lot of support, a lot of involvement from our people, but again, a lot of work to be done, I think, right? Because you have that happening in a context of a world where even though we're talking a lot about diversity, about inclusion, about kind of equality, we have big challenges, right? We have a lot of polarization also kind of happening in the world, which is kind of in many ways the opposite, right, of inclusion. So there's challenges ahead, and I'm glad that Booking is focusing on it, but also glad that a number of companies are kind of starting to really walk the talk in that space.
Yeah, I see the point as well that you're making. Again, there's no end goal here. It's not this sort of tick the box. So, okay, we've done that. Let's finish now. We've done that. Which seems to unfortunately be the approach in some organizations, but it's a journey and it's an ever evolving journey that you're on. You've done so many great projects, initiatives, but if you could sort of point out a few, what's something that you're most proud of having a thought back?
Well, I must say, it's not as much about projects. When I think about particularly my time at Booking, what I'm most proud of is the way in which kind of the HR team came together, to help us navigate what's been basically the toughest crisis the company has ever had or the sector has ever had, right? And I saw so many colleagues really kind of rise up to the challenge, right, and come up with creative ways, to solve all the issues, to solve new issues. There was great collaboration kind of within the people team, but also with other teams, right? So the level of connection that we built with finance, kind of with legal, with kind of real estate, et cetera, it was super nice to see that happening organically in the organization. And if there's something I'm proud of, it's really that, right? It's really kind of how the team came together. And I think by playing that really important role throughout the crisis, I think HR kind of raised its game and its visibility also with the company.
Yeah.
And we're in a better position now to do kind of things for the kind of the aftermath of COVID.
It was tough, right? Because all of a sudden HR was in the spotlight. And people are always making this comparison of, how the finance team were in the spotlight during the financial crisis. Would you make that comparison? Because I know many people could strongly disagree with that. I'm sure you've heard.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've heard that comparison.
Yeah, I don't think I see that distinction as much in either crisis, meaning I think HR has been very visible in this crisis. But if you look at the first year of the crisis, where companies had to brace for something that no one knew how tough it was going to be, a lot of the effort was around cost controls, reprioritizing, ensuring you had cash flow, raising money in the market if you could. So finance was quite fundamental on that. For a number of companies in the travel sector, but not only, you had to deal with an incredible amount of complexity with partners, with customers, which meant the legal department was full on trying to navigate and figure it out. Commercial departments, right? You name it. So
supply chain, right?
Everything, exactly. So I think it's for me, it's hard to separate. Yeah, I think we've heard more about HR.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's possible, but quite frankly, I think it was kind of something that really kind of challenged pretty much everyone around kind of every organization.
Yeah, it's definitely a team effort to get through it.
Absolutely.
What are you looking forward to the most over the next coming months? What are you most
first and foremost, it's the recovery, right? Kind of, so we can partly only hope, but this notion that it seems like with Omicron going really kind of fast, but not being as severe as kind of some of the previous versions of the virus, we might be moving into some sense of a new normal. And if that happens, you already see as people become a bit more confident, they book holidays, they travel, right? So I'd say both from a personal and professional kind of perspective, it's important for me because professionally, of course, if people start traveling, right, and doing something that I think most people didn't realize how much they valued it until it was taken away.
Yeah.
It's ability just to travel, to take a few days off, to see something different, to connect with loved ones. And now that we have that as kind of more at reach, people are really coming for it. So I think that's going to be great for the business. But it's great also on a personal level. I haven't traveled much. I have, family that's in different countries. So the ability to reconnect and with friends and with family abroad and to take time off in a different way for me, I think will be important. So to be very frank, that's what I'm really looking forward in the coming months.
Yeah. I was actually literally on booking.com yesterday.
Right.
Looking at doing a staycation, and we're just looking around, and I was like, it was even weird just to be in the thought process of going through that, because I just haven't even thought about it for 2 years of being able to do that. So it's good to hear that there's going to be some sense of normal. We hope, right? We hope every time we
can exactly. We can only hope for that. Exactly.
Yeah, I've used it. I think we've all built up a certain level of resilience now, right? I think everyone globally has up their threshold of resilience throughout this whole period. But before I let you go, I'm gonna jump into our quick fire round. So we do this to every guest, right? I don't think we had that 5 years ago. I don't think we did. But
I wouldn't remember, Chris. I think it feels like such a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. So first question is, what are your personal hobbies and passions outside of the office?
So first and foremost, kind of family and friends have always been kind of very, very important to me. So kind of spending good quality time with friends has been harder because I've lived in different countries and my friends are spread around the world. So not as easy to connect with them as it used to be. I also kind of the beginning of my day is important for me. I start my day by kind of meditating and doing a bit of exercise, and doing that with some regularity has really helped me also kind of through this extended kind of period.
Is that guided, by the way, just out of curiosity? Do you what's your process for meditation? Is it a guided app, or is it,
No, well, mostly Vipassana. So kind of insight meditation. Okay. And I haven't used kind of apps, but I like apps. I think they're a great way to get into kind of meditation. Mm-hmm. I think if you've done it for a little bit, you probably might not need apps or not choose to do it. So I'm not against them by any stretch of the imagination. Quite the opposite. At Booking, we have thousands of people that use apps that we subsidize or offer to kind of help with well-being and with mindfulness. But for me, I just like to keep it simple. I'm very curious. I love learning. I love reading, discovering new places. I have young kids, both under 10. So also I learn a lot, from them and with them, all the time, constantly. So I'd say those are the main things. And then I've always liked cycling, and being in Amsterdam is kind of the perfect place.
Kind of, you have to, like,
you almost don't have an option, right? You have to cycle everywhere. So that's nice. That's nice to be.
If you could click your fingers and change one thing about HR, what would it be?
Change the mindset from input to output. So, I think there's, in average, too much focus on process, on compliance, on consistency, on risk management, and not enough focus on things like, the impact you're having, on innovation, on agility, on shaping culture, on stuff. So it needs to be less on the input and more really on the output.
I love that. How would you say that your family and friends describe what you do for a living?
Well, my family might be a funny one, because my kids, as I say, being under 10, I think they think I try to send more messages than I get, and I'm not very successful at that, right? So I think I keep getting more, and that I do kind of games on the screen, because there's often when they come into the home office, there's a bunch of people on the screen, and I'm doing that pretty much the whole day, right? So I don't think they would describe it much beyond that.
Yeah, and I'm sure your wife pretty much knows what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, all too well.
Yeah. The last response I got to that question is, my kids think that I fire people for a living.
Luckily they're not. Yeah, they didn't get it from that standpoint.
So, yeah,
but it's a tough one in HR. Yeah, it's a common one, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. On that point, then, this is more of a tough one, I suppose. What is the legacy? We've all had a lot of time to think of this, and reflect about what is our why and our purpose and what we do, right, and why we get up every day. What legacy do you wish to, do you hope to leave for your kids? Leave behind?
Legacy for my kids
and family.
Well, if I think really kind of high level, I think it's a world with more room for curiosity, for open dialogue and compassion, to be quite frank, because I goes back to my point on polarization, right, of opinions and all of that. I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that happening for a number of different reasons. And I sincerely think, if we can contribute towards building up more openness, more dialogue, more empathy, more compassion, I think it's going to be a better world where kind of kids can grow on to do amazing things.
Yeah, we can hope for that. Definitely, that's great. This is a bit of a strange one. I've just thrown this in. This is a new one, by the way. So you're one of the first people to answer this question. So don't be afraid. It's not that bad. Have you ever considered quitting HR? And just
quitting HR.
Yeah, just walking away and trying something different and going in something different. Just
once
something
a week. Once a week. No,
no, I just want it's something someone asked me this recently.
Yeah.
Like not HR, but it's Chris, have you ever considered quitting your job and do something new? And it really made me think about it. So I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I mean, I am, to be sincere, I'm not really kind of long-term. I joke once a week because we do have, in HR in particular, right? We have some challenges and some moments that you like, but although I started my career in management consulting, I was one of the lucky ones that I found my passion early on. And I always loved the freedom, right? And the opportunities you get in HR, right? You see the organization from a very special, kind of very unique, kind of vantage point. And you get involved in almost everything, or anything, right? You have an alibi, so to speak, to really get involved in all parts of the organization. And I think that's great. I love that. And being very commercially minded as I am, it gives me an opportunity to learn so much, from different parts of the business, and then to help and to impact on that. And it's also nice to see that over the last few years, we've all seen how the stuff we do in HR, talent, culture, organizational effectiveness, org design, et cetera, they all have gained a lot of prominence in the market, right? Like you see more and more of an HBR issue will be about half of it or more will be about leadership and HR related things. Mm-hmm. Whereas, maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you saw more marketing or supply chain or what have you. So I haven't yet, but who knows, right? I might still do it later on, but so far I've been pretty fortunate, I think.
Yeah, you're right. This is never-ending learning, right, curve. Especially when I started from where we were there, 15 years ago to where we are now. It's kind of, it doesn't even look the same. It's unrecognizable, the role of a HR leader. And it's consistent. And honestly, when people ask me that question as well, what do you do and that we do, it changes people's lives.
Yeah.
You think about the well-being element you mentioned earlier, it truly is life-changing. The work, the decisions that are made by people like yourself and the organizations out there change people's lives.
Yes, and you do it at scale.
Yeah.
Right? It's nice because you do it for thousands of people. Mm-hmm. And if you do it well, even if some of those people move to other organizations, they will take something that they've learned and some of that with them to other places, right? So I do think, you can have a very significant kind of impact on a very kind of big number of people.
Yeah. What would you say is the biggest investment you've made in yourself in your career?
It's a good one. So it depends how I look at it. If my MBA was definitely not cheap. So
did you self-fund it? You self-fund that?
So I did. I was lucky enough. I had some equity back in the day that paid for some of it, for half of it, but the rest of it and living expenses and all that, I paid for that. And I think it was an amazing professional and personal experience. Not just professional, it was a great personal experience. So that would be money-wise probably the kind of the biggest one I've made and a good one. But more than that, I think if you make a decision to trail an international career, that has costs, it has sacrifices that you make. And for me, that's probably bigger than the money I put in the MBA, the choice to trail an international career. I've lived in a number of countries and I've learned so much. And I think I've grown not just as a professional, but as a person. I continue to, and that has been, I think, a pretty amazing adventure. And I'm not sure I see it exactly as an investment, but if you think about it, right, given some of the trade-offs and some of the sacrifices you have to make, it is also kind of an investment.
Yeah. People always ask me what some of the common things that you see in the most successful HR executives, right? Because we're like 300 plus of these interviews. One of the most common threads is exactly what you just said. They always point out the fact that if they didn't take those risks or move to those countries, experience those different cultures, it's very challenging professionally, family life, relationship wise, etc. But those experiences and being exposed to that is what made them successful and being able to sit in the seat they are in now. They always point that out. So the fact that you pointed that out is very important and telling for everyone listening to make note of that as well. And they didn't realize it at the time either, how impactful.
Most of these things you only realize when you look back.
Yeah.
You don't realize it at the moment, as most great kind of learning goes, right? So
yeah. Here's a new random question for you as well. You're like the experiment today of the new question. I've been off for a month, so I've had a lot of time to think. Who's your best friend?
My best friend?
Yeah.
My best friend is my wife.
Okay. I'll say why would you say that, but you kind of have to. No, I'm only joking.
No, it's not. But it's an easy one because there's just and now after 2 years with on COVID.
Yeah, but if you're not sick of each other now, then
yeah, she better be. Yeah, she better be.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's interesting because more broadly, I haven't had one best friend. I had a small group of friends that are very kind of close together.
Yeah.
And that are spread around the world. But it's important, right? I mean, this whole kind of period, I think invites you to reflect on the importance of friendship, family, kind of the loved ones, so to speak, right? And how do you keep close to them, even if you're far away from a physical distance standpoint? So
yeah. I know it was a random question, but that's exactly why I answered you that, because that also, it made me think about that recently. It made me maybe reassess that because it was weird how so many friends and family members all of a sudden started reconnecting during the pandemic. So even though we could see each other beforehand and we could travel, we never did in many cases. But for some reason, we're on Zoom calls every week. We all get. I've spoke to cousins, friends, families, aunties, uncles more than I had during the pandemic in the past because you took for granted
Absolutely.
that you can do that. So that's why I know it's a really strange question to ask during a HR podcast, but I just wanted to ask you that question because it had me thinking in the same way. And then last question is, yeah, and it's a tough one because there's always sort of similar generic answers that you can give to this, but looking back, and obviously you're still on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
What's a piece of advice you would give to those sort of HR leaders of tomorrow? Because we don't know what tomorrow will look like, so it's quite a tough one. What advice would you give to people that are on their journey to sit in your seat?
One piece of advice. Well, look, the one thing I always tell kind of people kind of in the HR space kind of around me is the classic one, which might not be the one I would choose now, but let me mention that briefly because it is keeping close to the business, right? We are first and foremost kind of business professionals who happen to be looking at the angle of HR. And I think there's a common issue I always talk about in the HR space is that we very often fall in love with our processes and our tools and our stuff, and we become a bit insular in the way we do things, and we disconnect from the business. So keeping really close to the business, understanding how the business works, what are the levers, what are the challenges, what are the big opportunities, what's keeping people up at night, not from an HR standpoint, but from the business standpoint. I think that makes a huge difference, right? Because it keeps you connected and relevant as part of that. And I think the further up you go, the less of a technical expert you are, the less of an HR person in the way you are, and the more of a member of a leadership team or an executive committee or whatever you call it in your company you are, right? So that angle is really important. You're still going to bring in your craft with you, but you got to be really well kind of connected with the business. So that's something I've been kind of carrying around and talking to people kind of in my teams or kind of elsewhere. But to be sincere with you, Chris, what's front of mind for me, it's something I said earlier in our conversation, which is also focus, prioritize. There's an enormous temptation, given everything we have going on now, to try to do so many different things. We feel it every day. We have that challenge as anybody else has. And the relentless focus on trying to do less things better is important. And it's tough. It's tough because if you're doing a good job, chances are people will want more things from you and different things from you. So how do you keep that balance where you're doing a good job, but you're managing your boundaries effectively? So then you can have that impact, right? Which is my point of moving from input to output. I think that part is really important as well. So I'd say not one, but those two things.
Yeah. One of the most important pieces of advice I got given, this is when I was like 17 years old, was do the basics to a high standard consistently. Because we can all chase the new shiny objects. And then you can kind of, and we all do that every day. There's a new shiny object in HR, and especially in the technology landscape that you could be chasing. But if you can do the basics to a high standard consistently, then you can focus on those things as well. But look, I really appreciate you coming on. It's can't believe it's been so many years since we last spoke, and I really appreciate you being a supporter of the show and for giving your time.
I was going to say we look better, but than 6 years ago, maybe, Chris. So I think we're good, right? Maybe a bit of a bout with COVID has helped us. But it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always nice to talk to you and nice to kind of plug into your community. I think you guys have done such a great job, right? Pulling kind of such a huge amount of people, right? How many people do you have now kind of listening into?
It kind of changes if you. 200,000-300,000 a month. Yeah, it depends. And the pandemic actually increased that. I think because people just had that need to just see what's happening. Know they're not alone. One of the big things in this world, it can be quite lonely sometimes sitting in the seat that you are. Right. This is what I've heard. Right. I don't know it personally, but just kind of being able to hear from other leaders around the world and go, okay, I'm not the only one that's facing this challenge, and just hearing what others are doing. I think that's why we love what we do. When I get out of bed and the team gets out of bed, it's kind of just our job is just sharing that wealth of knowledge and helping everyone, almost sort of democratizing the content. And you don't have to pay tens of thousands of pounds to a consultancy company to be able to get this feedback, right? Just share it from the people that are living and breathing it like yourself every single day, and just bringing that together. So yeah, it's been hard as well, of course, you know, going from 100% physical in-person business to overnight that disappearing, you know, 99% of our revenue overnight gone. You know how that feels in your business.
Absolutely.
For that to disappear, but it's for our people. That's when you really realize as an organization how valuable your people are, because at that point it was me turning to the business saying, I don't know what we're going to do. And that's a hard conversation to have with your team when they look at you and say, what are we doing, Chris? Where are we going? And you don't know. And at that point, to turn to the team and say, what are we going to do? We can close down or we can come together and reinvent this. And that's what we did. So I'm very proud of everyone here for being able to do that, and also the support of the community and people like yourself, because without people like yourself and everyone who contributes to the events, the summits, the workshops, podcasts, there is no business. As well.
Absolutely.
So it means a lot to us.
No, congratulations to you and the team on that. And it's great to see kind of how much is available, right, for people kind of in their kind of careers in HR. I mean, I think, you know, kind of 20 years ago, we just didn't have, right, the access that we have today. So it's wonderful to be building community and for people to be able to learn from each other. So it's very, very nice.
No worries. Well, look, listen, I wish you all the best, and hopefully we get to see you soon. Until then, keep up the amazing work, and I'll see you soon. Okay.
Same here. Cheers, Chris. Take care.
Bye.